Ever Henderson felt twitchy as she drove Beatrice to the studio that afternoon for the first day of classes. Bea seemed jumpy, too, an odd mixture of excitement and irritation. It must have been the Santa Anas, those dry, wicked winds that roll down from the mountains in Southern California this time of year. When the winds come, the air temperature rises and humidity drops. The air electrified. The winds frazzle nerves, make people restless, ornery and suspicious. Happily married couples suddenly find themselves squabbling, lifelong friends bickering. Old grievances get whipped up in the winds. Bad behavior abounds. They call them the devil winds for the trouble they stir up. Ever tried not to think about all the trouble swirling in her head since she got the message from her lawyer, Carl, that morning. "Ever, call me. I have news." She hadn't returned the call yet. So long as she didn't call him back, his news would remain suspended, floating about in the ethers. It could be good or bad, indefinitely indefinite. Later, she'd thought. After she'd dropped Bea off at ballet. But then he'd texted, "Urgent. Can you swing by the office today, 4:30? And she'd agreed. "Are you excited?" she asked Bea, forcing a smile. "To get back to the studio?" Bea looked in the visor's mirror, touched the tip of her finger to an invisible blemish. "Yeah, I miss Miss V." "And Olive?" Bea shrugged, and her dismissiveness worried Ever. Olive hadn't been over since Bea got back from New York. Bea hadn't asked to go to Olive's either. The girls had been best friends since they were 10, since the day Bea walked into Miss V's studio and Olive marched up to her like Pippi Longstocking, with her bright red hair and freckles, and took her hand. "Come, stand next to me." From that moment on, they had been thick as thieves, like sisters. For years, Olive had practically lived at their house. She knew where to find the honey in the cupboard, the trick of their fussy doorknob, a gentle twist and nudge of the hip. And Cobain never barked when she came to the door. Something was up with the girls. Olive had stayed home this summer, opting for Vivienne's program rather than going to New York or Houston or Boston for a big company summer intensive as Bea had. Ever hadn't wanted Bea to go away either. With Ethan gone and all of them still reeling in the aftermath, Ever had hoped she would stay home, heal. But Bea had insisted this was what she wanted. These summers away were all part of the grand plan, to train with the best teachers in the country, to build a resume, but mostly to be seen early on by the company director so that later, when she was auditioning in a room full of dancers, they would remember her. Besides, even after all these months, Ever knew the house was so dense with sorrow, it was hard to breathe. And so Ever had flown with her to New York to drop her off, and like the last 3 years, Bea had spent the summer training at NYRB.